Will. And when shall the bill be read a third time? Now? Now, as it turns out. I'm sorry that I haven't done that for a while, actually. I just had to sort of re-jog the memory. Mr. Jeneroux, seconded by Mr. Broussard, moves that Bill C-220, an act to amend the Canada Labour Code Compassionate Care Leave, be read a third time and do pass. Debate. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we made it. We're finally at third reading, and it's been quite the journey to get here. But I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, this has been quite the remarkable journey. I want to start with just a huge thank you to so many people who've helped along the way, including my friend and a consistent champion of this legislation, the Honourable Member from Mount Royal, who has worked extremely hard to make this a reality here today. And of course, the Minister of Labour, who has been incredibly accessible throughout this fight and really is personally committed to seeing better bereavement supports in this country. I also want to thank the member from Beaches, East York, for agreeing to a trade with a member from across the aisle so we could continue to move this legislation at lightning speed through the House of Commons. The entire humour committee, chaired by the member from Charlottetown, in which I testified, and together we made a better bill. My seconder on this, the member from Mission Matsky Fraser Canyon, my friend who spoke so passionately on this at second reading, the member from Stormont Dundas South Glengarry, my friend from the New Democrat Caucus, the member from Elmwood Transcona, who let me bend his ear on these amendments, the member from Therese de Blainville for her support from the very beginning, and of course the House leaders from all parties, especially the government House leader, who has consistently helped to support this bill move forward. Now, our stakeholder community have also been just amazing through this process and are always quick to drop everything to meet on short notice. Specifically, a huge thank you in particular to the Canadian Cancer Society, the Canadian Grief Alliance, who both testified at committee with me, the Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association, the MS Society of Canada, Heart and Stroke Canada, and the Alberta Palliative Care Association, particularly Christy Pushbauer, who first came to me with the idea that we needed to do better. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to keep the rest of my comments brief, as Canadians have unfortunately had to face much hardship and loss in the past year, and this bill has given just so many a chance at hope. Amendments to this bill would allow Canadians whose workplace falls under the Canada Labour Code 10 days off work following the death of a family member. This amendment allows more workers time to grieve before returning to work, including those who have used the Compassionate Care Leave program. I also believe this extra time off will be especially helpful for workers after a sudden death in the family. Ultimately, this amended bill will help more Canadians. And again, I thank the Minister of Labour for her collaborative approach to making this change happen. The pandemic has made clear that we need to do some things differently, and bereavement supports is one area where we can do better for Canadians. We just saw New Zealand extend their bereavement laws to parents who have suffered a miscarriage. Imagine that. These are important steps, and I hope passing our bill means we'll see further policy changes on bereavement supports in the future. I truly hope that we can continue in what I think has been inspiring to so many Canadians, that Parliament can work. I hear regularly that the non-partisanship we've all collectively shown is inspiring more young people to consider politics and consider getting involved in the policy process. Thank you again to my colleagues from all parties for their continued fight, their support, and feedback on this bill. It's truly been an amazing honor to see our bill get to this stage, one step closer to helping millions of grieving Canadian families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Of the opposition.
The Prime Minister.
Investigate allegations. It is.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I will be honest, following this legislation, I haven't quite given it the attention that it perhaps deserves. I know that this particular issue, as the member mentioned, with countries like New Zealand, are taking huge steps forward in making sure that when people are going through times of bereavement, that they're particularly covered. I particularly appreciate his candid approach when talking about how he was able to get bipartisan support from all sides of the House. I'm wondering, though, if he can highlight for people that are watching, particularly what his bill seeks to address in terms of timelines and improving upon the circumstances for those who are going through the process.
Honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, so the scope of the bill, which originated as compassionate care leave, something that was near and dear to, I know, many members in the House of Commons. That's where we were at in second reading. After going through the committee stage and honestly the support from the member from Mount Royal, from the Minister of Labour, we were able to amend this bill to allow for 10 days of bereavement after the death of a loved one. So initially we were looking at 3 weeks after the death of a loved one. That would only apply to the caregiver side. What we decided to do, again with the support from the Minister of Labour and the member from Mount Royal, we ended up expanding that to 10 days past the death of a loved one. So essentially 2 weeks is the agreement. But it's not just for people who have taken compassionate care leave. It's for any individual who suffered the death of a family member or a loved one.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I too want to rise and thank the Honourable Member whom, in the second reading, I wanted to acknowledge just how critically important the care and compassion that is within this legislation could provide for grieving families. I have a question through you, Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to open up the debate in any ways beyond which I'm going to just directly ask the question. Would this also include families who would be grieving miscarriages, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Member?
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a key question, and that came up throughout the conversation of the debate. According to the department, there's already within the policy declaration, there's opportunity to expand this legislation within the department. It's not specifically written in our legislation, and I think that's perhaps a chance for opportunity for either it's an improvement to our legislation or it's maybe the member would like to bring forward another private member's bill on specifically that, because I think in seeing what New Zealand did, I think that is the right direction, and it certainly has a lot of support from a lot of the stakeholder community, and I think if we're serious about bereavement supports, that will be a logical next step.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Can the member comment, Mr. Speaker, on the amendments that were brought forward? I know that he said that the length of time was changed in response to a previous question that I asked. But I'm curious if he can speak to the amendments and how they were brought forward to committee, because I noticed that it does change the Canada Labour Code, but is there any implication to the federal government or the public purse, so to speak, in this particular legislation?
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverbend.
I look forward to sitting down with a member from Kingston and the Islands and having a further chat about some of these amendments. Yes, no, he's absolutely right. What we can't do as private members, and I know he knows this well, is that we can't impact the public purse whatsoever. So we can't impact EI benefits. We can't push for the government to spend more money. So as a private member, all we can do is move forward policy legislation. The conversations that I know the minister is engaged with her cabinet in terms of what the opportunities are to expand EI, I think is again where the future of this can go to. Unfortunately, we can't do that as a private member. But to speaking to how the amendments came forward, that's actually really the fascinating backstory in this bill. This is the first time, from my understanding, that at a committee there was a joint Liberal and Conservative amendment put forward, and it was brought forward by both myself and the member from Mount Royal, and passed unanimously at committee. But again, it was that commitment to nonpartisanship on this issue has really just been that tremendous backstory that we've seen throughout the debate on this bill.
I neglected to see that there was a member with their hand raised on the board, which I probably should have done differently at that last question. There was enough time remaining. So I'm going to give time to the honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona to pose a question. The honourable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And just very, very briefly, I know the member was just touching on this question of the EI, compassionate care leave, and I wonder if in his negotiations with the government, if he has any kind of update for the House in terms of what they may be planning to do to complement these changes to the Canadian Labour Code if they pass, to ensure that people can take this time and be able to access their employment insurance benefits at that same time, so that it's not only people who already have the resources to afford that time away from work who can benefit from this expanded bereavement leave.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverbend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, that really has been the key question all along, is about getting that next step, the EI benefits to follow the bereavement leave. And the member from Elmwood-Transcona has been supportive throughout this process, and has also asked those key questions throughout in trying to get this to that next stage. I have no update on my end. Unfortunately, I hope that we'll see something soon, if not in the budget, if something soon, but I do really hope that we'll be able to move that quicker, because you're right. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, the member's right that that's a logical next step that needs to happen. So EI supports, so follow along the bereavement supports.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Mount Royal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you so much to my colleague for Edmonton Riverbend, who has been absolutely exemplary in terms of this private member's bill. When people look and watch question period, they often get a very false sense of what politicians do, who we are, and the way lawmaking works. And this bill is a tremendous example of how people can cross party lines, work together, and create a good piece of legislation. It's an important testament to how committees of the House work. It's an important testament to how the Minister of Labour, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Labour, can work with a member who sponsored a private bill, and how people from all parties can combine to improve that bill. I want to thank the member from Edmonton Riverbend, because he never made this a bill about himself. He never made this a conservative bill. He made this a Canadian bill. And I want to thank the Minister of Labour, who worked so closely with us in terms of understanding that when a private member's bill comes to Parliament, you shouldn't just reject it because it comes from somebody from a different party. You should work with that member to see how we could create better legislation. I also want to thank the member from Elmwood-Transcona, who has been a constant champion of this issue and is always a pleasure to work with. Et aussi, j'aimerais saluer la membre de...
And I would also like to recognize the member for Thérèse de Blainville, who is good to work with in trying to improve legislation. And today, we have something before us which is good. It will satisfy the needs of Canadians across the country.
Bill talked about caregivers. And especially during this pandemic, we've all seen the heroic role of caregivers who have seen family members sick with COVID, who have taken care of them in a way that put themselves at risk. We've seen people take caregiving leave for years to help family members with cancer or heart conditions or other illnesses that are profoundly difficult to deal with. These people are heroes. And the idea that our current law would send them right back to work in the week that the person who they were caring for died seemed heartless. And the member listened to groups across the country that said, we need more time when a loved one who we're taking care of dies. We not only need to plan a funeral, if you're Jewish, perhaps to have a shiva, to take care of the will, to take care of consoling your other loved ones, children who maybe for the first time have experienced death. You need more time psychologically to deal with this before you go back to work. But in speaking to the Minister of Labour, she and I both also agreed that this was an incredible idea, but it should apply to more Canadians. People who are on bereavement leave up until now have 5 days of bereavement leave, 3 paid, 2 unpaid, to deal with the death of an immediate family member. And that's not enough. When somebody that is so close to you passes away, you need more than 5 days to be able to deal with all of the things that surround a death. My dad passed away last year after having COVID and then having a stroke. And for the first time in my life, I had to deal with things like going with my mom to purchase a burial plot, to make sure that we arranged a funeral, to make sure that my brother who's in Toronto could get back to Montreal for the funeral, to make sure that the will was, notarized in a place that we could access, to deal with bank accounts, to deal with all kinds of things. And while I'm not really in a job that I could take time off, it would always be nice to know that you could. And I sympathize so much with those incredible groups that the member from Edmonton Riverbend brought to the committee to talk about this issue. And so whether you have a sudden death in the family or whether you're taking care of a loved one, you need more time. And in the end result, we talked to the member from Edmonton Riverbend, we talked to our colleagues in the other parties, and what we decided is everyone should get 10 days. Whether you've lost an immediate family member under bereavement leave, or whether you were on compassionate care leave or long-term sickness leave, leave related to critical illness, in terms of taking care of someone, everybody should get those 10 days. And then the committee, the HUMA committee, did excellent work. Everyone talked to one another. Everyone collaborated. Our chairman from Charlottetown, the member for Charlottetown, did a fantastic job chairing the meeting, and we were able to bring a bill to Parliament that deserves unanimous support. It's one that should get to the Senate as quickly as possible, and it's one that should be adopted by this Parliament before this Parliament finishes, whenever that happens. So I'm in strong support of getting this bill to the Senate ASAP, and I again want to thank all of the members who restored my faith in the way Parliament can work. Et encore, j'aimerais remercier.
Again, I would like to thank in particular my colleague for Thérèse de Blainville, my colleague for Elmwood Transcona, the member for Charlottetown, and in particular the member for Edmonton Riverdend, who did outstanding work with this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good day.